Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajam of all ages, after the nightmarish torment of patch 1.1 dropping a few days ago, the developers instantly decided to schedule a Campfire Chat livestream to talk about it with the community today. Then Season 1 launched yesterday, and it was a pretty rocky start to say the least. A lot of people just straight up quit playing before the season even started, quite understandably, but there are still a very large number of people still wanting to give it a chance, still wanting to play a game that they enjoyed beforehand, and for a good few of them, this stream was actually the opportunity for the developers to try and give us something. And, in my opinion, they actually have. I don't live and die by Diablo's success. I will move on from this game one day. That's just how it is. I don't need to say anything positive about this game if I do not believe it to be positive myself, truly. And I think that I've proved that the last few days with how vocal I've been. But I think this stream has had genuinely good responses to the issues that the community has brought up. That said, the stream happened, it's over now, and if you didn't have the heart to watch it yourself live, you're probably wondering exactly what happened, what they said, and what it will mean for the continuing future of this game, so let's go on in and break it all down as concisely as I can. First off, they heard us, and clearly they are trying to be better in response. There was a lot of explanation about why they did what they did, and while I still think they absolutely made a large number of mistakes with this patch happening when it did, and what they told us was actually why this happened. They made some pretty significant promises that should lead to avoiding this in the future. They said the exact words were, they never want to release a patch like this again. And they made some pretty significant promises that should lead to avoiding it happening again. The main thing to mention first and foremost is that the nerfs that we got to player power were supposed to simultaneously come to a massive nerf to enemies in Nightmare Dungeons across the board. Originally that was planned to be in patch 1.1, and their vision for that is to make the feeling of what a tier 70 Nightmare Dungeon currently is be the reality of what a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon is. They want them to be easier and more approachable. They don't want tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons to be an endgame chase mechanic. They would rather introduce other things because Nightmare Dungeons themselves fosters a very specific build rather than letting people play a variety of things and just enjoy themselves. I get that now. I understand what nerfing the players significantly while also nerfing the main content that we engage with is an equivalent exchange in a way that will make both of them feel a bit simpler, and if both of these things had hit simultaneously, the complaints would have been a lot lower. But their mistake was realizing that the Nightmare Dungeon change wasn't going to be ready yet and still releasing the nerfs before nerfing the dungeons themselves. However, the Nightmare Dungeon changes are theoretically happening tonight, literally tonight in a hotfix, so look forward to that, expect it, and that should mean all of the player power nerfs will feel equivalently fine in the endgame properly compared to the new normal of what Nightmare Dungeons will be. If that is the case, then things will start to feel much better for players, which helps alleviate a lot of our issues with this patch already. Point 2 was experience. They saw a lot of people sitting at exactly 3 levels above them in Nightmare Dungeons on purpose because that was the XP breakpoint, and they didn't really like that was the case. They didn't want people to stop pushing themselves to do harder things, so they expanded it out to 10 levels to reward people pushing it even further. The issue with this obviously is that the new reward for killing enemies that are 10 levels above you is worse than the old reward for killing enemies that are 3 levels above you was. But again, this is because of a mix-up on timelines. This was supposed to actually happen and be applied at the same time as increasing the density of all Nightmare Dungeons in the game, while also increasing the density in Helltides too. They told us before that that would happen early on in Season 1, and they are reiterating that that will happen soon, and so the idea was to reduce the reliance on the XP bonus in general, because every Nightmare Dungeon will be worth significantly more experience if they are also more dense, so lowering the bonus for fighting higher level mobs, while still increasing the limits of that bonus to 10 levels, would actually be a positive change overall if the density also increased, because there'd be a lot more things to kill too. But again, the complaints from players are because something that they planned to do in conjunction with another change would actually wound up disjointed in the patch itself, and now they're being released separate. The nerfs came first, the buffs come later, which in the meantime has just made the experience feel worse until these changes are added. That said, density changes are coming soon, that's what they've said. No exact date given yet, but probably even as soon as the patch 1.1.1, which is the next big thing to talk about here. Next Friday there will be another developer stream, and on the stream they will be giving us a general breakdown of a patch that is hitting just a few days afterwards, most likely on the Tuesday of the week afterwards at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which is Tuesday, August 1st. Patch day is Tuesday, patch time is 10 a.m. Pacific. Just in general, that's how they've done it so far, so unless they decide to push this out a day earlier, that is exactly when I would expect this 1.1.1 patch to hit. What is going to be in it then, you ask? Well, they are responding to player complaints about inventory space. We're getting one extra stash tab. It's small, it's absolutely small, but they've said that they are wanting to do a lot more for inventory than that, so we'll have to take it for now. This is just the start, and I would say that it is acceptable at the moment, as long as we can trust them to come through on promises of larger things happening in the future. One thing that they mentioned is the idea of if you find a legendary in the wild and it has a good roll on it, maybe they could make it replace your Codex version of the aspect with that as its new power level. I've said that they should have done this a long time ago, because that way you don't need to just have stashes full to the brim with high roll legendaries in case you want to use them at some point. And I think that would be a really brilliant change if they actually can make it work. That is just how I've thought that the Codex of Power would be best utilized the whole time, and it would alleviate the vast majority of inventory space issues that we currently have in the game as they currently stand. There is no timeline on any of this, and they didn't even confirm if that is actually what they're going to be doing, but the fact that they even mentioned it as a possibility does raise my spirits a little bit, because that would be a really big, very welcome change if so. Next up, let's talk about class balance. A big part of patch 1.1.1 is going to be buffs, specifically mostly for Sorcerer and Barbarian. Who they are aware, they hit pretty hard in the recent patch. The main reasoning behind this is that they say they wanted to lower the top end of both of these classes to put them sort of in line with the middling builds in a way that lets them boost the classes as a whole and make it so that more builds are now the top end after that. Again, my issue with this is that they should have applied both of these changes at the same time. They nerfed it first and the buffs come later, and that is a really bad way to work it. They've clearly said that they don't want to do that again in the future, so hopefully they don't, because these buffs could not come sooner after the nerfs they applied. When this patch hits, they should be skyrocketing back up according to the devs, and I hope that is the way that it goes. It's just it's a weird roller coaster, right? I think it's entirely unnecessary. Just apply all the changes in one patch all at one time. The big main thing that they've said that they'll be doing to enact these changes is to specifically buff a bunch of lesser used legendary aspects to make them stronger, and thus while making those classes more legendary dependent as a result, it should also increase the build variety, as usually legendary powers are tied to only one or two types of builds, so buffing one of those buffs one build. Buffing another one buffs a different build, perhaps even creates a new one. Think of Druid. Druid, I would say, is the most unique and legendary dependent class in the game, but it also has the most endgame build variety, and there is a reason for that. I do look forward to the concept of the changes that they've laid out here, and I really hope that it works out for Barbs and Sorcs, because I had a Barbarian before the season that I really liked playing, and I would love it if anything that wasn't a Whirlwind build actually felt as good as Whirlwind does, especially after they nerfed Hammer of the Ancients, so we'll see what actually happens with that. On top of that, they specifically talked about low armor and survivability classes having an imbalance that hurts their enjoyment, especially Sorcerer, and they said that will be addressed in some way in the upcoming patch 2. Another really big thing that they brought up for patch 1.1.1, respec costs are going to be going down significantly by about 40%, which is massive. They brought up a specific point that part of their mission statement is to have a variety of really fun, enjoyable, high-end builds viable for every single class, but they realized that in the current state of the game, that is absolutely meaningless because of how hard it genuinely is to actually actively switch builds. So in the upcoming patch, they're going to be reducing the costs of doing so. A big response to this was the idea that obviously the biggest way to fix this is by adding a loadout system. They answered that they are saying that they are looking into it. They really like the idea of it, but there is genuinely just not a timeline on it currently, as it's a pretty big thing for them to implement. We may not get it for quite a while, but if they are confirmed trying to make it a thing, I'll take that over just not responding to us about it. And again, like inventory, it's a start. It is a step in the right direction. This doesn't fix everything right now, but it means that they're moving the right way. One more big thing to go over then, and this is that they said that they specifically actually want leveling from 50 to 100 to be a lot faster than it currently is. This relates to what I mentioned earlier about the level scaling and how the nightmare density changes were originally planned to happen at the same time, but they just sort of didn't, and they acknowledged that that was a mistake and that it will be fixed sooner rather than later. Past this, they made a really weird statement that confused the hell out of me. They said that they like power leveling. They think that power leveling is cool. They enjoy the idea of a high level character and a level 1 running through a dungeon having fun together, but that they don't like when it is the level 1 character just sitting at the dungeon entrance. But the thing is that is what power leveling is. That just sort of is what the term means. I guess they just mean that they don't want something like that happening. They would rather have a level 1 following around, trying to stay close, just doing their best to not die. That would at least create a feeling of engagement for both players in the activity, more than just standing at the entrance, but it's just a really weird statement to me overall. Past this, in relation to a question about leaderboards, they said Season 3 is likely the point for those to be added. They made a big point as well that they want to change things up so people are dying less out of nowhere, because dying without any input or any way to stop it yourself just is not fun. As a result, they are looking into hard CC, changing the way that things like freezes and stun work. They want us to be better at applying CC to enemies and enemies to be worse at applying CC to us, because it's just not a fun way to die. Same thing with randomly being one-shot from a corpse bow off screen, so I look forward to those days ending, especially for my sorcerer friends out there. Finally then, I wanted to point out two graphics that they created for us, essentially a sort of promise. The first is their mission statement as a live service game, a wide variety of viable builds to discover, put together, and optimize across all 5 classes. New items and powers every season to keep the game fresh and increase build variety. Continually evolving endgame content with high monster density for powerful builds to mow down activities to challenge your build. Make the game more fun for players. If they stick to that, no one will have issues with Diablo 4. If they can live up to that statement, the game will be in a really good place. And a big part of creating the environment that they laid out in there is what they've called a key process improvement, a bit of a technical term for basically just changing the way that they will interact with the game and the way that they update it in the future. The graphic for this says, when making changes to increase build diversity, let some builds be overpowered until we have provided compelling alternatives. That is really good. This is a very important thing to acknowledge because that is what was missing in this recent patch. It was a big problem with it. They've had both nerfs and buffs planned, and instead of giving us both of them at the same time, they gave us the nerfs first with the buffs 2 weeks behind, and that just does not feel good for players. These meta changes will occur at predictable times, like the start of a season. Again, good, it makes sense. Major shifts should happen in one big patch at a time that matters, not just a complete random. In situations where a bug is causing game-breaking damage or crashes, they will still react quickly, and that is understandable, and it mostly refers to things like the recent Bloodlance nerf because it was genuinely crashing the servers. All in all, I think that those two sets of statements, rules, and improvements that they've set for themselves are incredibly important and actually do a lot of good as long as they stick to them. And that's pretty much it, everyone. That's all they had to say about the game, the patch, our reaction to it, and of course my thoughts on the whole thing. Big things to look out for include the hotfix coming later tonight, which they've said will be very big, affect the game significantly, and I hope it does. Then also patch 1.1.1, which will come in around a week and a half from now, with a stream talking about it ahead of time next Friday, which I will of course also be covering with you to get you the concise version of that information. Honestly, personally, my thoughts on the game have gone up a fair bit from this stream. I really didn't expect to feel this much better after watching it. I really respect the reaction that they've had to player response. They didn't hide from any of it. They didn't really make excuses. They more just explained the mistakes that led to it to us. They gave us a timeline on when those mistakes will be fixed and how, all of which being relatively soon and relatively impactful, and then they dove into a number of quality of life changes that we keep asking about and until this point haven't gotten a solid answer on. At this moment, I would label myself as cautiously optimistic. They messed up really badly with the patch that they released, with a few major missing parts that are now being added in tonight's hotfix and in another major patch that is nearly a couple of weeks away. But we'll see how it all feels once these changes are applied. Of course, if the biggest mistake that they made was misjudging the timeline of it, if it was releasing one thing too early, I can accept that. If it only happens once. If the game feels genuinely good again in a week and a half, I will be happy to keep playing the season because I do enjoy the core of this game. I like Diablo 4 personally. So the way that I see it is, at least personally, I'm gonna give them a chance here, and hopefully they learn from this, and in the future they do not do this sort of half-assed patch that gets the nerfs out before the buffs, and instead do the nerfs and the buffs at the same time no matter what happens, so that the game still actually feels good to play for the players at all times. I can't speak for everyone. You have to make up your own minds based on the information that's been provided here, but I can definitely say that over the last couple of days, I've been personally getting more and more annoyed with the state of this game, and this has made me feel notably better as a response. Let me know what your thoughts have been down below, and of course this discussion will stay ongoing until the changes are actually applied so we can see what they truly mean. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.